Futurist Jim Carroll from the home virtual broadcast studio. Look, it's going to be quite the week because there seem to be a few global events going on. And like everybody else in the world, I'm watching with a very careful eye as to how things are going to unfold. And look, my entire reason for being as a futurist is I've always had to be an optimist about what might come next because my job is to paint a picture of where we can go if we pursue the trends. And I want to share with you one brief little clip, 20 seconds long, where I put the reality of my job into perspective.
As a futurist, I always need to focus on the opportunity. Look, I can't walk out here on stage and say, guess what, your future sucks, it's over, forget it. You won't get a lot of repeat business. But at a personal level, I choose to focus on the opportunities of the future.
I choose to focus on the opportunities of the future, and that's what organizations have brought me in for the last 25 years, where I've been getting on stage with some of the most fascinating organizations in the world at their global leadership meetings to put in perspective the trends that will take us forward into a fast-paced future. And no doubt over the last several years, the opportunity to do that has been incredibly challenged by a world that has become massively volatile, massively complex, and certainly for a lot of us, extremely confusing. One of my global clients brought me in 2017 at an overseas event, and they said, look, we want to understand what are the geopolitical implications of what is going on in the US with the political circumstances there. Can you really honestly put that into perspective for us? And I put a lot of thought and effort and ended up writing this blog post, what comes next with the decline of an empire. And what I was trying to do was put a reality check on where the current political environment could take us and what we might see as a result, both as a challenge for some organizations, but as an opportunity for others. Now, my wife is a very intelligent woman, and she always told me never talk about politics on stage. And I tried to avoid doing that within the post, but I did try to take a very real look at what happens when a nation begins to turn its back on the rest of the world. And so this week is another event in this seismic change in the global geopolitical situation. And I'm actually working on a blog post as to what we might see in the year 2021 as a result of COVID-19. I can't finish the darn thing because a lot of it is going to depend on what happens in the next several days. But it is worthwhile taking a look at this original blog post and considering some of the trends that I was talking about, what comes next with the decline of an empire, and think about what you've seen in the last several years, and then put those in the context of how things are going to change for the positive or the negative as we go forward into the next phase of this crazy reality TV show. And so that's what I've been doing down here in my home broadcast studio, is putting in perspective the trends that are taking this forward into the future. And when I put together this blog post as to what we can expect in 2021, I put a lot of thought behind it, but some of it is still very uncertain given the geopolitical circumstances that are still unfolding in this TV show. So let's think about some of the trends that I talked about in that post. Number one, science and R&D relocates. Part of what was happening in the geopolitical environment before the 2016 election was a lot of global R&D was shifting to countries like Singapore and certainly throughout Asia, and certainly with a lot of advanced European economies. The US was no longer dominant in R&D, and I actually had a blog post about 2012, the hollowing out of US R&D, because a lot of it was shifting overseas. And what I wrote in this post for this client and what I spoke to them about on stage in this European event was that, look, we're going to continue to see that accelerate, because what we are doing, the reality, regardless of your political leaning, we're not creating an environment that is conducive to scientific research. And certainly what you've seen in the last little while, an anti-science agenda, certainly that trend might play out. The second trend I wrote about is, look, solar and green industries will probably invest more where it matters. And look, we know oil is over. We know oil, carbon is dead as an industry. That's a scientific fact. It's nothing to do with politics. Even BP and all the energy giants and the overseas Middle East producers, they all get that oil is over, and that renewables and smart grids and batteries and energy storage and all this stuff is the future. And so if we are going to continue to see an environment in which the US turns its back on science in the future, then we're certainly going to see a lot of relocation ongoing of green energy industries. Number 3, I wrote that travel's shift. And this one is a little bit meaningless in the context of our pandemic world because certainly travel has shut down. But I think a part of what we were seeing was a lot of organizations choosing not to locate conferences and events in the US, or they couldn't get the proper visas to hold, for example, an international medical conference or an international scientific congress in the US because the darn people couldn't get in given the anti-immigration rhetoric. And so this is another area which is sort of open-ended as things unfold. Sporting events go elsewhere. At the time that I wrote the post, they were awarding the World Cup, and there was some question as to whether the US, Canada, the Mexico, three-party group would actually get it. They did, but there's some question as to, how will the world react should things go in a certain way with where they choose to locate big global sporting events, particularly if players cannot get in, particularly if visas are not available, particularly if an anti-immigration, anti-visitor rhetoric situation continues. Related to this, minds that matter choose differently. Look, it's no secret in the global economy that countries which have an open immigration concept that encourage individuals pursuing a PhD or a master's or advanced research, the countries they choose to relocate in certainly have an economic leg up when it comes to R&D, when it comes to discovery of new ideas, when it comes to collaborative industries, when it comes to the acceleration of those very industries. And we've already seen this damage occur. There was actually a report in the news last week that the US economy has probably lost $100 to $200 billion as a result of what it has done with H-1B and other forms of visas, restricting access to people coming into the country. Skills training evaporates. I wrote that if you think about manufacturing, old manufacturing is dead. The concept that we can simply press a button and bring all kinds of manufacturing back to a country by building borders and raising tariffs and stuff, that's not what's happening. It's robotics, it's advanced manufacturing technologies, it's 3D printing, it's additive manufacturing. There's been no shortage of manufacturing jobs in the global economy. What there has been a shortage of is the individuals with the capability to do the work. And so what advanced countries have been doing is working hard to ramp up the expertise and the skills of their people to align to the reality of what is occurring with the acceleration of manufacturing and all kinds of other industries. And I think what happens with this let's build a wall rhetoric is, countries come to think there's an easy way out and you press a magic button, the jobs come back. And the fact is they don't. Silicon Valley loses its dominance. I predicted that we might begin to see other technological areas in Israel and Canada and Hong Kong and elsewhere begin to challenge global supremacy when it comes to technology. That certainly is happening with technologies involving the industrial Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and other areas where the US is clearly losing its dominance. I wrote that perhaps we'll see new multinationals become a dominant force, that increasingly maybe a number of organizations will choose not to locate their head office in the US, but will choose to locate it in a more friendly global environment. So this one hasn't really come about, but in the next 4 years, who knows? It depends on what happens in the next week, and political discourse moves and matures elsewhere. Look, I'm a Canadian. We're north of the border. I spend a huge amount of time in that country, pre-COVID, speaking at events, speaking at conferences, speaking for leadership meetings. And, look, the US has been the beacon of freedom for the world. And to a large degree, that brand has been destructed, is that a word? Has been subjected to a great degree of negative influence over the last several years. And is, that where things are going to end up? We really don't know. Here's the thing. One of the most fascinating talks I did a number of years ago was in 2016 in Sao Paulo. It was for a group called the World Skills event. And this is a global skills competition of individuals working in skilled trades and advanced trades and, leading areas of R&D. And the whole effort was, what can a nation do to enhance its skills and capabilities as we go into this, tremendously complex future. And it was kind of fascinating because there were awards given out to teams participating in various skills competitions. The countries that were winning, all from Asia, all from Europe, Canada, the US, you know, I think Canada got graphics art and the US got like industrial design or something. It didn't win in any of the categories. We were already losing the global skills race before this crazy political environment ensued. And that's why, you know, what is going to happen through the next week or month to come will be fascinating in terms of what is going to happen with the 21st century economy and what we're going to see unfold as the world becomes increasingly complex. So, you know, I don't talk about politics, but there are real geopolitical implications to what is going to unfold here. And I'm watching it carefully, like everybody is watching it carefully. And I'm thinking about this post I wrote, you know, what comes next with the decline of an empire, because we have seen real degradation in terms of skills, in terms of capabilities, in terms of its role and influence, and simply its ability to align itself to the future. So as you're watching it, I'm also watching it. I'm going to be watching the breaking news, trying to gain an understanding of what is happening. It should be obvious where my mindset is. I align myself to the future. I align myself to trends. I align myself to science. I align myself to opportunity. And so for me, everything is going to be involved in looking at it through the umbrella of that original 2017 post, which you can find on my site, and in the link to this video, what comes next with the decline of an empire. It's going to be absolutely fascinating.